Hello, everybody. Welcome to the advice stream. I am your host, Jeremy International. We're live on Facebook and Twitch and YouTube and over on JeremyInternational.com. I think that's everywhere. This is my guest. Hello, everybody. Welcome. And oh my God, I always forget
Oldmin.
to do that.
Oldmin.
This is my guest,
Hello,
Oldmin.
everyone.
I always forget to do that. I forget to mute my browser, and then I have this weird echo, and it's terrible. This is my guest, Oldmin. Oldmin is joining us for the whole show this week. We'll see how long we go. Before we go too much further, if you'd like to seek advice from me, Jeremy International, or Oldmin, then head on over to JeremyInternational.com. There's a contact form there you can use to send us a question. We will read it anonymously on the internet, and Oldman and I will discuss that question. That's how advice shows work. How's it going, Oldman? How you been?
You know, it's been up and down. I've had my struggles. I've had my successes. I'm really trying hard to think of a success right now, but it doesn't come to mind.
I can think of one. I can think of a success for you.
What's that?
We had a really great time. Was it yesterday already?
Yeah, it was yesterday.
Yesterday, we had a really great time. We hung out by a pool with some friends. That was fun.
Yeah, that was great.
You know, I think you and I are similar in that we tend to gravitate towards, what's the word I'm looking for? The negative things in the world. And, you know, that's a different stream than this one. So we're gonna do our best, both of us together, and it's not easy for me, at least, but let's do our best to see if we can find things that make us happy to talk about. How does that sound?
This isn't Jeremy International Warfare. This is just Jeremy International.
That's correct. There's lots of opportunities, certainly for both of us, to talk about things we don't like, and it's important, everyone, to talk about the things that you don't like, that you see around you in the world and in your community, because that's one of the ways that we change things is we talk about them. Sometimes we need to shout about them. But that's a different show. This show is about us trying, at least doing our best to focus on positive things. Here's a positive thing that I'm going to share also. This episode of the advice stream is unofficially brought to you by Yum Earth Gummy Bears, made for toddlers, but grown-ups can eat them too, and I do. They're real good. The first ingredient listed is organic rice syrup. I don't know what that is. Do you know what organic rice syrup is?
No, but I can kind of imagine how it would be used.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like corn syrup, but it's with rice.
Yeah, it sounds better.
Hey, Eichel. Welcome to the stream. Hello. Good to see you. If you're out there listening on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, or JeremyInternational.com, feel free to say hi. Hello. Eichel,
one of the most faithful fans of this show.
I know. I feel like with Oldman on the show, Eichel is like our VIP, our MVP audience member, and then Fred Undead, who is my marriage spouse, has just shared with me that she will not be watching the show tonight. So,
oh my gosh.
She's busy. She's got to play Final Fantasy, whatever the new one is. 16? Is it 16?
I don't even know at this point. I stopped at 7.
Final Fantasy ain't going to beat itself. And that's cool. I was reminded when we were hanging out this weekend with our friends, Oldman. We were hanging out with a good friend of ours, Margot McDonald, who's a musician and a singer. And she was telling me this feeling that she gets sometimes before she performs, that I get sometimes too. And I always kind of surprised when I hear other people feel this way, because I feel like it's a really specific and hard to describe feeling. But it's when you have an obligation to do a show and you really don't want to do it, but you know that you have to do it anyways because it's your job to do that show. And that's like such a show business feeling, and I miss that because I don't really perform a lot live these days. But she was talking about how she had a gig and she didn't want to do it, but she got herself together and she went to do it. And the second she got on stage, it was great and she had a blast. And
Yeah, she said it was one of her best shows.
yeah, and I've been there. I miss having that feeling. I think you have to perform a lot to get that feeling, and I'm not doing much at all. But
Well, let me say one thing though, Jeremy. I don't mean to interrupt you.
no,
This is the
please.
Jeremy Show, not the Oldman Show. But I don't think that's completely a showbiz thing, because
Okay.
canceling plans can feel like addictive, even if you're not doing a showbiz thing. Like, I've lied to you before about being sick or whatever because I didn't want to come to the event,
Sure.
and I regretted it later on, but in the moment it felt good.
Yeah, that's true. And I would say most of the time in life, and we all cancel plans. I cancel plans all the time. I almost canceled the stream tonight, in fact. And then, saying you're not going to do something and then going ahead and doing it anyways, usually is a really good feeling. I think I strive to err on the side of doing a thing instead of not doing a thing. But I don't always succeed at that. I guess the show business part is this feeling of like obligation to get on stage and do this thing that you've dreamed about doing since you were like a little kid, and like doing it enough and frequently enough that you can have this feeling of, I don't want to do it tonight, is a special kind of feeling.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I had my therapy appointment this morning, and we were talking about, I'm not a particularly religious person these days, but Rosh Hashanah is coming up, and I have some obligations with my family that are on a religious and spiritual level that I always do. For Rosh Hashanah, I do part of the service at the synagogue where I grew up, where my parents still go. And it really stresses me out, and I'm not very good at it. And I generally prefer to not do it, and I always kind of build myself up in the days or weeks leading up to this holiday to try to figure out a way to get out of doing it. And I always go through and do it anyways because I feel obligated to. And I always feel really good afterwards. I'm always glad that I did. But I sure don't feel glad about doing it while leading up to even the second before I start to do it. I'm like, God, I don't want to do those. But then you do it.
Without a treatise on Jewish religious philosophy, what is it that you do at Rosh Hashanah?
So the community where I grew up is the Orthodox Jewish community. So they're pretty old school. They're pretty traditional. And the community is small enough that they don't regularly have like a rabbi or like a professional person that does the service. So everyone's very communal. Everyone gets up and does part of the service, which is varying lengths of singing songs in Hebrew and leading people in a song. And the one that I usually do for this holiday is like, I don't know, maybe 6 lines, and it takes maybe altogether 3 minutes to do it. And I get so nervous about it. And I've done it since I was 13. And like every year, at least once a year since I was 13. And I still get really nervous about it. And, like Oldman knows I've gotten in front of hundreds of people in my underwear. I wasn't nervous for a second when I did that. And this, getting in front of maybe 15 people, half of which I'm related to, for 6 lines of song by myself that you really can even just mumble through because that's usually what people do. It drives me crazy. It makes me, I get shaky. I get sweaty. Like I'm sweaty now thinking about it. I get so nervous.
Maybe you should try it in your underwear.
Yeah, I think that'd be frowned upon in my community where I grew up. But maybe that'd make me feel less nervous about it. Good advice, Oldman. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So should we read a question? We haven't gotten a lot of questions through the website, but I found a few on various spots on the internet that I thought would be interesting to discuss. Shall we? And I'll go ahead and just remind everyone, if you would like to seek advice from me and or Oldman, head on over to JeremyInternational. Scroll all the way to the bottom. Scroll. and you'll see a contact form where you can reach out and ask for advice. I got a comment here from Kira Bagel, who says, sometimes I get the same feeling of fear and anxiety when I'm coming home after a fight with my partner, but then I see a smile and it makes it all better again. Oh yeah, in a in an ideal situation, not even in an ideal situation, in a healthy situation, those types of like anxieties are like normal and healthy, and then we go through the thing, we see that it's not as bad as our everyone's anxious subconscious makes it out to be, and then things are great. And that's certainly what happens to me every year when I do this part of the service in my hometown, is that I uh, lose sleep over it, and I get really nervous and I dread it, and then I do it, and the second that I'm done, I feel great and I'm so happy that I did it. And it means a lot to my family. In a weird way, as an atheist, it still means a lot to me. And yeah, I get that, Kira Bagel. You know, we were talking about before, Oldman and I are like this. I think lots of people are like this. We tend to hang on to negative things, and we sometimes lose perspective about how not everything is terrible, although plenty is terrible. I would never say that it's not. But we lose sight of the things that we can appreciate, we can be thankful for, the things that connect us to joy and to the people that we love. And it's great. But man, sometimes it's hard to do that. I think I've mentioned this on the show, and Oldman certainly knows about this. In After the 2016 election, I decided for some reason to read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, and that started. I'm not being too hyperbolic here when I say an obsession with reading everything I can about Nazi Germany since 2016, and that's been bad. That's been a bad scene for me, and I'm done. I read not an autobiography. I read a biography of Hitler. Got to the end. Hitler kills himself. There's a little bit of a wrap up of what happened next in the book, and then I'm done. I'm taking a break from learning about that. I think I got whatever it was I needed from that journey in my life. I certainly know an awful lot about the rise of fascism and how terrifying it is to be in the United States right now, because similar things are happening. But I'm done and I'm good. And now I'm going to read about interesting but maybe less terrifying things. Started a biography of Houdini, is what I'm reading now. Houdini.
I have a recommendation for a palate cleanser. There's this delightful little book called Hop on Pop.
Okay. Is that a kid's book? I feel like I've heard of that before.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of obscure, but it's by this guy. He likes to go under a pseudonym. You might have heard of it.
Okay. You have a mischievous look on your face.
Yes.
Well, I read fiction for fun. Like before I go to bed, I'm always reading some fiction book or another. But I do nonfiction, like audiobooks, while I'm in the little bit of a commute that I have, or when I'm doing like chores around the house. And that's really kind of where I'm getting most of my like book information consumption from these days, is nonfiction audiobooks. And so I'm doing a biography of Houdini. I just got started. Haven't learned a lot about him yet. But the guy who's reading it says Houdini in a weird way, and I don't know if I can handle the whole book right now. But we'll see how it goes.
How does he say Houdini?
He's
You
like,
have to do it.
he says it like Houdini. Houdini. And I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Okay. Let's do a question, shall we? Oh boy, here's one. Okay, once again, these are not questions people have written into the website. It's been a little while since I've been doing this show consistently, so we haven't been getting a bunch. If you have one, please send it through. And Oldman and I.
Let's hear from the audience. That we have here.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have a few people, so.
I absolutely prefer to do questions that come from the audience. So if you got one, go over to Jeremy International and send it through. But in the meantime, here's one that I think is kind of hysterical. It's a little long, but bear with me, please. I am a happily married man with two awesome kids. My immediately goes into the problem right here. My high school girlfriend, Lisa, has recently gotten in contact with me and dropped a bombshell. She confessed that unbeknownst to me, I got her pregnant 20 years ago when we were teenagers, and my mother bribed her to get an abortion. I no longer have contact with my mother, but this type of controlling behavior is very characteristic of her. Lisa, who is childless and unmarried now, has a lot of regrets about the abortion and requested that I father another child with her to replace the one she lost then. I realize this is an extremely unorthodox request, but I feel very badly about what my mother's toxic behavior put Lisa through. I can just picture Lisa coming to my mother to ask for help and my mother verbally berating her into submission. I asked my wife for her thoughts on the idea, and she angrily shot it down and said it would be cheating. To be clear, I get that extramarital sex is literally the definition of cheating, but this scenario is kind of different because I'd only be doing it to help Lisa. Can I really can it really technically be considered cheating if it's for an altruistic reason? I'm considering going ahead with it despite my wife's objections. Do you think I'm justified to do so? Or is my wife correct that it would be cheating? If I go ahead with it, should I tell my wife I'm doing it despite her objections or just leave her out entirely? Yeah, so what's your take on that, Oldman? What are your thoughts?
It sounds to me like this is a person who is looking for a moral justification for a very common situation, which is that people get in touch with their high school flames and they want to be with them instead of their spouse or something like that. And yeah, I mean, my read on this is that it's all just dancing around his own real desire to want to be with his old flame.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you want to cheat on your wife, you don't have to come up with such a convoluted reason to do it. Kira Bagel says, translation, I asked my wife if I could cheat on her and she said no, but I want to do it anyways. Yeah, that's it. Nailed it, Kira Bagel. Good job. There's so much of this that doesn't make any sense. First off, why I get that she, I mean, hypothetically, abortion is a choice, and hypothetically, people have the right to regret that choice, I guess, although I've never met anyone that has. So let's say that this person first off, I find it incredibly hard to believe that in high school she got pregnant, never told him, and just went to his mom for help. That doesn't track for me as a real thing that happened, but that's fine. Well, when you get questions like this, you have to just kind of accept it at face value. And if she wants to get pregnant, she doesn't need to get pregnant by him. I don't know where that comes from as being necessary. And even if it was, there are ways that you can impregnate someone without having intercourse with them. We live in a magical world of the future. So even if his goal was to do this for altruistic reasons to save this poor woman who his mother harmed 20 years ago, none of this involves him having sex with anybody.
Yes, and I might also say that even if that situation happened exactly as she described, she could have said no.
Yeah.
The mother bribed him, is what he said, right?
Yeah. And
so she had cash for it, and that can be a coercive type of thing in certain situations. But given all the rest of the issues with this description of the situation, it seems to me like, yeah, she made a choice when she was in high school. She regretted it. And she doesn't have to have a child by the same man because she had. Yeah, there's a lot more Facebook conversation going on behind the scenes here.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I feel like he's doing this to like cover his back because he wants to cheat on his wife, and then if he gets busted, he'd be like, "Hey, look, I did it for good reasons, and I can prove it because I wrote this letter." Maybe the bigger lesson here is cheating cheating is whatever is outside of the parameters of your relationship. If you, within your relationship, you decide that it's totally fine for both of you or one of you in the relationship to go bang whoever you want, then that's not cheating. But in the parameters of your relationship, if talking to, walking down the street holding hands with another woman after the sun goes down is cheating, then that's cheating. And if you don't have a conversation with your partner that defines those parameters, then we have to look to like social norms about what society expects people in a monogamous relationship to be. And sleeping with someone else for any reason, it would be cheating under those terms. His wife said that it's cheating, so it's cheating. And if he wants to cheat, he can cheat, but that means he's a cheater and he needs to deal with the repercussions for that.
We got a spammer.
Yeah, we got a spammer. What do I do to get rid of this spammer? I don't know enough about how Slack works. Hold on, I'm going to figure it out.
You can always ban them after the show if you need to.
I blocked
I'm
them.
sure that
you blocked.
Good. Didn't that feel good? Pressing the block button?
Yeah, although they're still showing up in my thing. Did I do it wrong? Hold on. Let's try it again. I should probably... Oh, no, they're blocked. Okay. Cool. You blocked. Yeah, anyways, that one cracked me up because it's just so ridiculous.
Yeah, and transparent also. Yeah. Like really transparent to anybody who, especially reading it out loud. Like it sounds even more ridiculous when you read it out loud, probably.
I hope I didn't add too much like flavor to it to make it sound more ridiculous than it is.
You got enough flavor for yourself.
My dad always says this is a free country and everyone has a right to be an asshole. You just can't pretend you're not an asshole if you're going to be an asshole. Like if you want to cheat, then go ahead and cheat, but that means you're a cheater. And if you love your wife and you care about your relationship, she's already told you she doesn't want to do this. She doesn't want you to do this. So if you go ahead and do it anyways, then you're not a good dude. And that's it. If you want to be not a good dude, you got a right to not be a good dude.
It's like that meme where there's two people that are saying, I consent, and then there's Jesus or whoever is in the meme saying, I don't. But this person's trying to get like a third part, like Reddit, to bless the cheating.
Yeah. In this case, I think this one came through Slate Sex Advice column, which is really terrific, and it's written by Stoya, who's a retired adult performer. Actually, I don't know if she's retired or not, but she has lots of really interesting insight because she, as you can imagine, has been through all of it. Yeah, Eichel says freedom to do, not freedom from consequences. Yeah, that's it. That's it, Eichel. Anyways, I like that one. That one cracked me up.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, that was one question down. We have a few more. If you are not a bot trying to do ads in the chat and you haven't said hi, go on and say hi. Oldmin and I aren't gonna be mean to you. We're here, unless you're a fascist, we're here for you. What would you say? Let's talk about this, Oldmin. Let's talk about this. What would you say? Like, are there anything you want to share that you feel like I've been thinking about this a lot just because, I'm getting older and I have a kid. Like, do you ever think about like the formative moments of your life, like something that's happened that changed you? And maybe I would like if we can find them to stick to things that change you for the better, but things that change you forever. You ever think just like, if I wasn't there at that particular time, I'd be a totally different person today? I think about those things a lot.
Well, as we said earlier, both of us have a memory that tends to focus on the anxious things.
Yeah.
I like that.
I like putting it that way, the anxious things.
Yeah. This is going to sound perhaps like it's not necessarily the type of thing that would change a person for better. But when I was in fourth grade, I got hit by a bus.
Okay.
And, I flew through the air. It was going like 20, 25 miles an hour.
Jeez.
And luckily, I ended up with no major injuries. I had just cuts on my body. I went into shock at some point. I remember that. And afterwards, I definitely respected the power of traffic more than I did before.
As most people that went through that type of situation would, I'd imagine. Jeez, that's
Yeah, but
terrifying.
also, I mean, it also gave me a little bit of a taste of, the fragility of life in general.
Yeah. Um, yeah, those like I talk about this on the show a lot too. Those like the cliche that whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger isn't always true. Sometimes the thing that doesn't kill you just messes you up for the rest of your life. But sometimes it does make you stronger. Sometimes it's true, and those times are really great. When something bad happens and you come out of it as a wiser or stronger or
Yeah.
otherwise better person.
I should add one more thing to that story, which is that afterwards, my parents tried to sue the bus company. And I remember that there was an attorney who came over and he interviewed me about what happened. We went out to the front of my house because that's where I got hit by the bus, right in front of my house. There was one street to cross.
Was it a school bus?
No, it was a handicapped bus,
Okay.
but not a school bus. But anyway, when the lawyer asked me what happened, I told him the truth, which is that I didn't look both ways and that it was my fault. And my dad and the lawyer both looked at me and were like, "Are you sure about that, Oldman?" And I said, "Yeah, that's what happened. It wasn't the bus driver's fault. It was my fault." And that's one thing that, like, when I remember that incident, I'm always a little bit proud of myself as a kid.
Yeah.
That I didn't lie just because clearly I knew what the adults wanted me to say.
Yeah.
But I also knew it was my fault and not the bus driver's. And I hope that bus driver is doing okay. Or I hoped afterwards that he was doing okay.
Yeah, man, wow. Yeah, I mean, that's something you should be very proud of. You did the right thing. You had integrity as a little kid. Little kid integrity is not very common. I don't think it's very common in adults either, unfortunately. Okay, that's the interesting story. And it definitely was one of those times, I would say rare times in life, where actually the thing that didn't kill you made you stronger. I think most of the time,
Literally.
the thing that doesn't kill you actually does, most of the time, mess you up forever. At least that's been my life experience. When I was in middle school, so I don't know, 12, 13 or so, my parents bought my sister, who's a bit older than me, seasons passes to the Chrysler Center, which is in Virginia Beach or Norfolk. And that's where like Broadway touring companies would go through in the area where I grew up. And we saw Cats and A Chorus Line and Jesus Christ Superstar and Sound of Music and Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And if that changed, that was one of those pivotal moments in my life, like that summer where we saw all of those shows one after the other. I remember those days very well. I'm really close with my sister, and that was really big bonding time for us. And that's kind of when I discovered like theater and performance and stuff. And it was really, really memorable time. If you're watching at home and you want to share a pivotal moment in your life, go ahead and throw it in the chat. We'd love to hear that. Now, if you're a bot trying to sell us something, then you can not do that. Yeah, but okay. So we'll wait to hear from some of those and see what everybody's got. Okay, here's another advice. This one's real short. I found this one on Reddit. I'm 24, broke, and want to get the fuck out of America. What's the best course of action? What do you think about that one, Oldman?
Um, I mean, that's verging on legal advice right there. But I would say that if you're really dedicated to it, you need to. This is some really bad advice, by the way. Some really bad advice. But if you really want to get out of this country, you should marry somebody from another country.
That's what I was gonna say. And if you're
Yeah,
broke, then that can be, at least you can maybe meet someone that is slightly less broke than you.
hopefully.
What I was gonna say this is, dig into your ethnic background, because some countries will make it really easy for the descendants of people that emigrated to the United States to come back to the country that your ancestors came from. There's lots of places that do that. Uh, I think Ireland has a really good policy for that to make
I
it.
was just about to say, when I was obsessed with Ireland as a kid, and
Mhm.
I looked this up pretty early, like how could I move to Ireland? And I was disappointed to find out that I'm in like I'm like one generation or two generations too far removed to do that.
Interesting. Because
Yeah,
I think like the population of Ireland hasn't recovered from the big waves of immigration to the United States, like in the late 1800s, early 1900s. They still haven't replaced that massive part of their population that came here in those
yeah.
days.
And I had a crush on an Irish girl fairly recently, and I definitely would have helped contribute to that population decline problem, but that didn't work out either.
Alexi Westkrecher says, I'm assuming that's coming from Facebook because it's the whole person's name. Says, glad I snuck in just in time to hear Dadman's bad legal/marriage advice. Uh,
Yeah, don't listen to me on the immigration marriage advice. That's one that I have proven myself not to be the best expert in.
um, I mean, yeah, okay, I'm not going to comment on that. Okay, cool. Yeah, I would say to answer this person's question is to dig into your lineage and see if there's, if you have like a grandparent or maybe even a great grandparent that came to America from somewhere. See if that place has like repatriation policies. I mean, it's still going to cost you money because you're going to have to fly there, but at least you might be able to get citizenship easily. And then, any country that's still in the EU, if you have citizenship there, then you got citizenship to everywhere in the EU. So you don't that doesn't lock you in. Like if your great grandfather came from, I don't know, Germany or whatever, that doesn't mean you have to live in Germany. You could live in France. You could live in Austria. You could live in. Uh, I heard this recently. I've spent some time in the Czech Republic, and I didn't know that no one there calls it the Czech Republic. Like that's
It's
like
called Czechia now.
Czechia. Yeah, I didn't know that. I mean, like technically, the country is called the Czech Republic, but no one calls it that, and I never
I
understood
don't
that
think
when I was
that's
there.
true. I think they legally changed it to
Oh,
Czechia
really?
just a few years ago. Yeah,
Huh.
I think they did. It was like a branding thing.
I had a rad time in Prague. I love that city. It was great. I thought for a long time afterwards about trying to find a way to live there for a little bit, but uh, it, nothing was really viable for me. And I don't have any lineage from that particular part of Europe. So, but if you're happen to get a chance to travel to the Eastern European area in the world, you should check out Prague because it's a rad city. Saw some really affordable ballet there.
Just don't go to Romania and then brag about how the Romanian police will allow you to get away with anything like Andrew Tate did.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Don't do that.
That's my advice.
um, yeah, I've never been to Romania before, but I have some friends that have spent a lot of time there. I think they were really into Dracula, is why they chose to go there.
That's the worst reason to go to Romania. They're probably really sick of that.
I'm sure they are, but I mean, I don't. Dracula is pretty cool, so
Yeah, I got no problem with Dracula. Although I do think Frankenstein is the better horror novel, but that's totally
I
different
agree with
conversation.
that. I agree, for sure. If you're gonna compare the two of them, uh, if you got to do like one or the other, if you got to do like a Beatles or the Beatles or Elvis kind of situation, then I would do Frankenstein any day. But it is possible to like them both.
Yes.
Um, yeah. Let's see what else. I don't really have a whole lot planned today, but I have a few more questions we can read. Okay, here's another one. This one's kind of a bummer. We tried to keep things light and happy and positive, but this is about to be the end of that.
All right.
Uh, Me and my fiance had our first kid almost a year ago. We struggled a lot financially, and we just got to the point where we were able to stabilize and get ourselves to a point where we can finally start to save at least something. Despite using protection and being careful, we are expecting our second baby in May. I am looking for advice both financially and from a parent's perspective. I make about 42K and will be getting a raise soon up to about 50K. I am the sole provider and I'm just stressed on if I should try to switch careers or something that pays more or just stick with it and hope for advancement. My main concern with staying with my employer is the lack of benefits. While the pay is fair for my experience, they provide no insurance benefits for my family and only will cover a portion of my healthcare expenses. If anyone can, if anyone has any advice or has been in a similar situation, your input would be greatly appreciated. This one I feel like is more up your alley there, Oldman.
I was going to say the opposite. This is a parenting question. You're the only one with a child to
So
speak
I
of
don't
this.
think it is a parenting question. I think it's a career question. I think it's a financial
Okay.
question. Regardless, I mean, the parenting part I'll say is if you're using protection, and I don't know what being careful is, you shouldn't be pregnant again. Uh, and depending on where you are in the country, obviously getting uh, family planning support is difficult to do. But people that don't want to get people in consenting sexual relationships that don't want to get pregnant. If you're using the pill or a IUD and a condom, you're more likely to win the lottery than get pregnant. I don't know if that's statistically true, but so the first thing I'm going to say is look at what you're doing for using protection and being careful, whatever that means, because you're not doing it right, and if you're just going to keep doing what you've been doing, then you're going to be having a third kid before you know it. That's the level of parenting advice, I guess, that I have. The other thing I'll say is kids are a massive, massive financial burden. We live in a country, even if, when you have a really good job that has really great benefits, isn't going to be there to support new parents of either gender, either sex, um, in the way that they would in the rest of the modern world. We live in a country that punishes parents um, financially and career wise very much. I don't know anyone in the last 70 years that's been able to make ends meet with one parent working and the other person not. I don't there's It's not possible to have the inflation goes up and wages don't go up accordingly. So while it once upon a time maybe my grandparents, although they certainly both worked their entire lives, but maybe people in my grandparents' generation, one of them could work and one of them could stay at home. That hasn't been the case for almost anybody, unless you're fabulously wealthy since then. So I guess the parenting question I'm going to give you is this isn't going to work. This isn't a sustainable situation, regardless of what job you get next, unless you can find a job making six figures somewhere right away. Your partner's going to have some kind of income. It sucks, but they are. If you have family that you can lean on for support with childcare, if you can find a job that gives you some childcare options, but one parent working in a two kid house in the United States isn't possible.
Yeah.
There's no part of your situation that's going to work with a second kid on the way.
Mhm.
Um,
I guess the only thing that I really can think of to say, well, there's a couple things that I can think of to say. The first one, I guess, is um, yes, it's good to be responsible and it's good to remember all those things, but people get messy. People do things that
Yep.
they regret. And yes, like the advice to be careful is absolutely the right advice. But even when you're trying to be careful, people are flawed. And, there might be some night you go out to karaoke and you come back wasted and you have sex, and next thing you know, somebody's pregnant.
Absolutely. And that's why it is so essential that uh, people have the right to choose whether they want to continue that pregnancy or not. And
Yeah.
they're not mentioning that as an option. So they're either, morally or moral or politically against it, or they live in a place where that right's been taken away from them. So, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, I'm saying that, and if this person was like a person I was talking to face, I wouldn't mention that because that's not beneficial to them. But as far as like
Right.
finding a bigger teachable moment for people, is don't mess around with having risk for pregnancy. And we all, everyone's gotten drunk and made a mistake for sure. It happens. But do your very, very best to make sure that doesn't happen. People don't get pregnant by mistake, especially right now in big
Yeah.
parts of the United States. Don't mess around with that. Um,
Right.
uh,
Well,
I mean, I would say from my perspective, my terror when I was single, my terror of getting someone pregnant by mistake was so persistent and so all encompassing, my anxiety over that I don't uh, think I could have performed in a situation where I was taking that kind of risky behavior, because that was terrifying to me for my entire sleeping around phase, which was a very big part of my life. So
good for you, Jeremy. I was just about to say that the best advice that I can give is advice from my own life, which is never to get laid,
yeah, that's the best
or
way to
just for
make
a long
sure you're
time. Just
not.
don't, and then
Yeah,
you don't have to worry about it.
yeah. Uh, girls got to eat though. Oldman, girls got to eat. Uh,
Oldman.
so the other piece of advice I think, and going back to the career part of this, is when you're looking at your compensation for a job, the dollar amount you're getting shouldn't be uh, the only thing you're looking at. That benefits, including health insurance, should be, if you're making a little bit less money over the course of a year, but you're getting health insurance, that's very valuable. And I think that a lot of people, especially young people, are looking at that number. They're looking at that dollar figure and they're thinking, this is how I'm gonna decide what job I'm gonna take, is whichever one pays the most amount of cash. But you need to consider um, benefits. You need to consider 401k. You need to consider health insurance. You need to consider if you work for a place that gives you stock options. You need to consider all of those things. Don't just look at the dollar amount. Getting a raise from 42 to 50. Um, in some parts of the country, 50K is a lot of money, but I don't think it is anywhere if you got two kids and you're the sole breadwinner. I don't think that's a
I'm
lot of
pretty
money,
sure
but
around somewhere around there is like the actual median income.
yeah,
Of
but
the
that's why there's no single working parent houses anymore, because any family, both parents have to work, because no one gets paid enough money anymore.
Something also just occurred to me, which is that this isn't really necessarily a relationship question, is it? It's more of like a finance. There are relationship elements, but it's not what this letter writer or post writer focused on. It's like, I'm in a financially strapped situation.
Yeah,
It's not what's going to happen to me and her,
yeah,
uh, as much as it is like, what do you think that this is financially viable?
yeah, and it's not. She's gonna have to. Maybe I don't know who's writing this. I'm assuming they're a hetero couple, because they're talking about getting pregnant by accident, but I don't know the answer to that either. But the person that's working from home, or that's staying home and not earning money, is going to have to start earning some money. You can't. I don't think there's anywhere in the country that you can raise
Right.
two kids at 50K without health insurance.
And that conversation might be a relationship question, but it
Yeah,
wasn't really what he was
yeah.
asking about, I guess.
Like, yeah. I mean, how do you talk to your partner about uh telling them that I know you had this dream to be a stay-at-home parent, a stay-at-home mom, or a stay-at-home dad, but you can't do that anymore. That's
Yeah,
a
I don't know
hard.
if I'd have any answer to that either.
Yeah, I don't. I don't think I. I mean, the answer to that is you say it like that. You gotta have the numbers and the data at the table, and you have to figure out exactly how much you need to not just make ends meet, but to save, because kids get sick, human adults get sick too, and there's a catastrophe is always a blink of an eye away, and you can't. It's also not. I mean, I don't know how anyone could raise two kids and not have a system. Lots of people do, of course, because they have to, but not have some kind of savings where they have a safety net. Because that's just terrifying. This whole story is terrifying to me, because there's so little resources for people that are having kids, and they have such a narrow margin here, and just one disaster, broken leg, or I mean, I will give you a perfect example of this. My partner and I were doing pretty good. We were making decent money, at least for relative to where we had been in our lives, and we were doing a pretty good job of paying down our credit and saving up. And then that's when I had cancer. However long it's been, 6 years ago now, and we had really good health insurance, and it covered most of it, but we still had to pay a few $1,000, even with our health insurance. And then the cancer was in my neck, so I had to have a lot of radiation in this area, and then it ruined all my teeth. And health insurance doesn't cover teeth. Your dental insurance does, and dental insurance doesn't cover anything but preventative care. And there was no preventative care. My teeth were pretty good shape before the radiation, so that was probably $10,000. I had to have 6 root canals in a couple of months. And that was thousands and thousands of dollars. And that destroyed, we didn't have that kind of money in our savings. It destroyed our savings. We had to put a lot of it on a credit card. We had to borrow money from family members. We're fortunate that we had the ability to do that. We sold stuff. I had some stock that I was able to sell. But those things happen to people all the time. And we don't have a system in place in any level of our government, of our society, that helps in that kind of situation. At least
Right.
doesn't help in a consistent, reliable, dependable way. And it took us years. I mean, we're mostly recovered from that financial disaster that was my teeth. But it took us a long time to recover from that. And we didn't have a kid then. And we still struggled. And this person's about to have 2 kids and is making a whole lot less and has lot fewer benefits than we had in those days.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing that I suppose came to mind here is not necessarily advice, but more of a political gripe, as you've just outlined, that
Yeah.
this country does not support parents. And not only does it not support parents, but it blames parents for everything that goes wrong,
Yeah.
or teachers with kids,
Librarians.
anybody who actually is there to support kids gets all of the blame, and all of the resources that parents would need in order to, raise their kids or even take care of themselves so that they can take care of their kids.
Yeah.
Is it's not this at the same level as it is in some other countries of similar wealth.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess this ties everything together. The advice I give this person is look at your lineage, see if you have a grandparent or a great grandparent that immigrated from a country that has like repatriation policies in place. And if that country is a place that actually has social services and cares about people, then go there.
Or get an abortion.
Yeah. If you live in a place that still lets you do that.
Right,
And
exactly.
that's not a decision anyone should make lightly. But it's a decision that people should be able to make. And I don't know how you make 2 kids work on, and like $50K isn't even what this person's making. They think they'll be getting a raise sometime soon. They're making 42, and they think that they're gonna do that and have 2 kids.
Well, let me say on the other hand here, I don't want to make it seem like either of us are blaming somebody for having a kid when they're not financially in a stable position to do so. Because a kid is a blessing, as you very well know, Jeremy, and your daughter is a blessing. And so, yeah, there's a lot of people who will have kids and they don't necessarily know how they're going to financially support them in the first place. I don't want to say that those people are necessarily always being irresponsible, but it is a tough situation. And this person is in a situation where they feel like they need to ask Reddit
Yeah.
for advice on it. And yeah, so I may have flippantly said you should get an abortion, but the only reason that I said it like that was that I feel like making that a very explicit option without any judgment is a good thing in public.
I mean, I agree with that, and I think that that is a valid piece of advice to give a person in this situation is get an abortion. But that's not something that's available to more and more people in the United States, assuming that this person's there. And it's also a decision that some people wouldn't make for themselves, and they have a right to not make that choice, just as much as the Supreme Court denies the fact that other people have a right to make that choice.
Yeah, and we don't, like you said, we don't really even know if this person is in the U.S. We're just speaking to it as if it were in the U.S. because we're assuming it, and Reddit is a very American-centric website, and that's the advice that we have to give as Americans.
Yeah. Just to go back to what you said, that they weren't being careless. They were being careless in a way that anybody can be careless. I'm not, I want to be clear to say I'm not judging them for being careless, but they were being careless. I'm careless with things all the time. I hardly ever floss my teeth. Just having said, I've had all of these dental problems. I'm cruising for a bruising. That's my stupid choice I have a right to be dumb in that way.
Yeah. Carelessness is relative, though.
I agree.
It depends on what's going on, what happened exactly. It could always be, and while it might not be very likely, it's possible that the birth control that they tried to use did fail.
It's certainly possible. That's why if you really don't want to have a kid, you use 2 different kinds of birth control.
Right, and 6 condoms.
And you stay on other sides of the room.
Right,
That's
exactly.
the only way to be sure. Oldman, I'm sorry you're not getting
advice, people. Audience, do not wear 6 condoms. That's going to make it more likely.
I was going to say, I'm not a material physicist. Isn't that what you call people that study properties of materials?
Yeah, I never figured he was a 6-packer anyway.
But 6 is probably worse than 1, I'm guessing. Eichel says they wear 7.
I wouldn't know, but yeah. I'm sure.
You'll get there, Oldman. You'll get there.
Oh, thanks, Jeremy. I appreciate your expression of faith.
You're a charming fella. Man, the chat is not lively tonight, is it? I hate to be
because I'm not here to troll you.
I hate to be the guy, like when you're you go to like I don't know, an event or whatever, and someone's like, "How's it going, Boise, Idaho?" And everyone's like, and he's like, "I can't hear you," and he like holds people hostage until they scream the right amount. I hate to be that guy, but I kind of want to be that guy right now.
I'll be your guy.
Start rec. How's it going, Boise, Idaho? I've never been to Boise, Idaho.
Why would you?
Why would I? I've been to Branson, Missouri. Oh, Eichel's trying to get a question together. Eichel, I just want to remind you, if you say in the chat you're going to put a question in, and then one question comes in later, everyone's going to know it's from you. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I don't think you need to worry too much with, you're not using your real name unless your real name is Eichel Galactify. I don't have my glasses on. Yeah, Galactify.
Okay, I have another question. This one is more... This is another one that I'm having a hard time not judging this person harshly, but I'm going to do my best. I practice radical empathy. I'm meeting this person right where they're at, however ridiculous that situation is. And I'll give a
Hmm.
little disclaimer. We've kind of dug into this a little bit, but we acknowledge the existence of sex on the advice stream. And we're about to get a little bit more uh, into it as far as conversations about sex and sexuality goes. Can you handle this, Oldman? You ready?
I don't know, but I'm gonna find out.
Okay.
No, I can handle it. I'm
I
just fucking
think
with
you
you.
can
I'm
handle it.
screwing with you, or whatever is not gonna get you banned from Twitch.
I think you've seen a dirty deck of cards once or twice. Okay. That's how I know that there's 52 sexual positions because I saw a dirty deck of cards once. It's exactly 52. Okay. I'm a woman who's been married. Also, I just want to acknowledge the ridiculousness that we were reading a lot of questions, at least some of which I know for certain have been written by women, and me and Oldman here are two men. That's just what it
Yes.
is. If you look back at the guests that I have on the show, I worked very hard to have a diverse in every way group of guests, and I uh, this is just uh, that's what it is. Anyways, I
Yeah,
just want to
like
say,
I'm like the least diverse guest that you could have, except for maybe a little bit of neurodiversity.
Ullman, you're unique and special you. So you're as diverse as it can be because you're you, and no one else can be you but you.
That's very sweet.
Okay, here we go. Person who's made choices that I would never make on my own, but they're where they're at and they're asking somebody else for help, and we'll do our best to help them too. I'm a woman who's been married for a month. The wedding night was the first time for both of us, though we've always communicated very openly what we hope for and want from sex. Turns out penetration doesn't feel like much to me, but my husband has been happy to use his fingers and tongue for my pleasure. The trouble is, I don't think I've orgasmed yet. Most of the time, he fingers my clit. We're all grown ups here, everybody. It feels nice, but not much happens. Sometimes I'll feel like I'm getting somewhere, but then reach a plateau where I stop feeling any effect. Just 3 times he's gotten me to what I think is 95% of the way to orgasm, but then my clit becomes sore for him, too sore for him to continue to bring me to an actual climax. Or was that really the climax? I know I don't feel particularly stimulated by it. Still, it's disappointing when the exact same strategy on his part only works once a week. And when I'm left after an almost maybe orgasm thinking, was that it? I've never been able to masturbate past the plateau point, and I'm not comfortable trying toys, especially this early in my sex life. Do you have any advice?
I'm very tempted to make jokes, but I'm not going to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I know that this is something that happens
Yeah.
with people, especially in like relationships with people who are very inexperienced, that they're just finding out about what they like and what'll help them achieve orgasm. Um, yeah, and so I feel like this is not something that's particularly rare, especially among people who like waited for marriage, from what I've read.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
From what I've read and heard from people that I know that have made
and
similar
heard from
choices.
people, of course, my friends and other people. Yeah, I guess the first thing that would come to mind is definitely trying more toys.
Yeah.
Uh, Once she is comfortable with it. Um, what do you think, Jeremy?
Eichel says what she needs to do is explore what gets her going. She won't be able to help him direct what to do unless she knows it herself, which I think is the best advice anyone. I'm sorry, Kira Bagel says that. Eichel says, well, that was my first question. If she can get herself there, then the answer is not so this is as difficult of a question. I actually think I was getting ready to say maybe this isn't a great question for us to address because this is a woman's very specific vulva having person's sexual question. And neither you and I are that type of person. But I will say that there's a long history of non vulva having people neglecting the sexual gratification of their vulva having partners, if that makes sense. So maybe this is a good thing for us to talk about, because I think that there's a complicated conversation to have about when you have a partnered sexual relationship with someone, whose responsibility is each other's orgasm. Whose orgasm is whose responsibility when you're in a, a ongoing partnered sexual relationship. And I think the answer to that is it's both people's. And she definitely needs to spend some time exploring however she wants to. If she doesn't feel comfortable with toys, then don't use toys for some reason. But if she doesn't, that's her choice to do that. And she needs to be able to figure out what her body needs so that she can communicate that to him. Whether this is your first sexual relationship, whether this is your 100th sexual relationship, that's always the case. Is it's up to you to communicate what your body wants to your partner, and it's up to them then to listen and to take that seriously and to follow through with it. But yeah, how can he get her there if she doesn't know what there is? I guess is how I would answer this. I'd also say, not that this is helpful to this particular person, and if they were sitting across a table from me, I probably wouldn't mention this to them. But please don't wait until you're in a legally binding partnership with a person before you have sex with them. Some people's bodies just aren't physically compatible, and some people are never going to be able to have satisfactory, at least penetrative sex, because it's not how their bodies work. And if you're hitching your wagon to somebody whose body just isn't compatible with yours, that's gonna suck for both of you for a long time.
Yeah, and like following up on my saying about the toys, that was just something that was in there that I guess I hooked on to. But experimentation in general is going to be the answer here, I think.
Yeah,
Uh, if you're committed to this person, this one person, and you don't know, you don't have the experience of what you like with other people, then you're going to have to try a bunch, several different things to see if it's possible. And if it's not possible, that's another hill that you're going to have to cross.
yeah. And Kira Bagel has a really good point. I'm assuming Kira Bagel's a she. I should just try to use non-gendered pronouns here. They say that their partner and them have been together for 11 years and they're still learning what each other likes. And that's another good point, especially when you're in a long-term committed relationship, is what your body wants, what your body needs changes sometimes dramatically and weirdly and unpredictably over time. So part of being committed to someone is being able to pivot and to continue to listen and continue to explore together, because at least in part, your partner's sexual satisfaction is your responsibility. It's not 100% your responsibility, but it's 50% your responsibility. Maybe it's like 45% your responsibility, because they need to know what it is, and then they need to be able to communicate that to you, and you need to be able to hear it and follow through. And that's, I mean, this, I've said this on the show before, and anyone that's had more than a 30-second conversation with me about relationships have probably heard me say this too. I think that people, especially people that are kind of new to sexual relationships, tend to make sex simple in ways that it should be complicated, and complicated in ways that it should be simple. And I think people that are new to sex oftentimes think that it just works, and that someone gets on top of somebody and you do the thing and then it's great and everyone has a wonderful time. And that's one of the ways that people want to make it simple in a way that it's complicated. That's not how it works. And you have to learn someone's body, and you have to learn how it works and what their body needs to make them feel good. But you also they need to know what that is on their own first. That's why God invented masturbation, is so that we can figure it out on our own, and then we can tell it to somebody else, and then they can do it for us, which is even better. Uh, I'm gonna get that on a bumper sticker.
It's a pretty long bumper sticker.
It
But
would
all
be a
right.
pretty long bumper sticker. That's true. It would be small text. So yeah, I think, I mean, the good news is they have time because they're cause they're married, and they're just getting started. They've only been married for a month, so they've been sexually active for a month, which isn't very long. And even experienced people sometimes can take that long to really figure it out, I think, for each other. But then it changes because people's bodies change. And if you're going to be with someone, if you're married and you're expecting your marriage to work out, you're going to be with each other forever and for the rest of both of your lives, and your bodies are going to change in so many weird and unexpected ways over that time. And that's, one of the great things about a long-term relationship is you kind of never stop exploring and figuring each other out.
Yeah,
Because
and let me add on to
Yeah,
that a little
please.
bit,
I'm
Jeremy.
sorry, I was talking for too long. Go ahead, Oldman, please.
No, not at all. This is your show, man. No, all I was going to say is that something that I've definitely, I wouldn't say had to learn, but something that I got, more aware of as I got older was that sex is not just about the physical act. And, that's something that we're told a lot, and it's something that's fairly commonly known. But I don't think a lot of young men really understand what that means, because sex is a moment of vulnerability. It's a moment of maximum vulnerability.
Yeah.
And being comfortable with that vulnerability is a big part of it. The emotions that you can have, the anxiety that you can have. Men, they'll go like this if they're too
Yeah.
anxious. And something similar is going to be true of women as well. That we need to, that all we both need to accept that vulnerability and be comfortable with it.
Yeah. Um, I agree with that too, and I think, and I the type of kind of not like the type of sex people that aren't in a committed relationship, like the one night stand, or like, you're just kind of hanging out with someone kind of sex, still has an emotional component to it. And I think that's another thing that people refuse, or people try really hard. Some types of people try really hard to pretend isn't true, is that, there's like the type of like deep emotional connection you have with someone that you're committed to, whether you're married or whether you're just, doing your best to make it work for as long as you can. That's a really specific type of emotional investment, and that is not the only type of emotional connection that can happen from sex. But you can't have sex without having some kind of emotional reaction. And I think, in the same way you were saying, I think a lot of younger people, I think a lot of younger male identifying people refuse to believe that, but it's absolutely true. It doesn't have to be love. It doesn't even have to be as like romance or whatever, but there's a intimacy that comes from, being being naked and having your genitals all over someone else's
Right.
genitals, or having your face in someone else's genitals. That's as intimate as things get. And you
And it's
can't,
vulnerable. It's
and
always vulnerable.
it's vulnerable, and you can't not have an emotion. There's no way to do that without having an emotional component. That emotional component doesn't need to be what we think of as being love. It doesn't need to be connected to some kind of long-term building a community, building a family, building a home together. It doesn't need to be any of that, but it's always something. And I don't know if we necessarily have the words to describe what that is, but it's there. And to deny that is to set yourself, is to, first off, almost certainly be dishonest with your partner about what you're really feeling. And secondly, is just to set yourself up for disaster and heartache.
Yeah, and not finishing also.
Yeah.
Like another thing that just comes to mind now is just acknowledging the fact that sex is really funny.
Yeah.
It's always funny. It's just a funny thing to do with your body. And if you can't laugh at yourself, or during, don't laugh at your partner. But laughing at yourself during sex is fine. And just having humility about it and accepting the fact that there might be something funny that
Yeah.
happens, and then laughing about it with your partner. That's a really good way of helping to ease that anxiety.
I agree with that too. Eichel says being relaxed can help too. Being anxious can be a huge mental block. Yeah. And so, like going back to the letter writer, who's, is starts off by saying that they're a woman, is the orgasm for women is sometimes, not always, but oftentimes for a lot of women more complicated. You've been a sexually active person for a month. And I think it's a little too early to start getting stressed out about your ability to have an orgasm. I would say most most women, when they begin their sexual lives, probably aren't, without the help of something like a toy, probably aren't getting off with their male identifying partner after a month, because it's complicated. And he, it seems like he's doing his best, but he certainly doesn't know what he's doing because he just got started too. So take your time, don't get stressed out, try to focus on having fun. But most importantly, is you need some private time to figure out how your body works. And then once you figure that out, you need to be able to communicate that to him. But you don't know, and he can't know if you don't tell him. Everyone, and this idea of like, I know how a woman's body works, and I can do this and I can do that. Like, women's bodies aren't all the same. Everybody's different, and what works for one person might not work for another person. What one person loves, another person might literally hate. I can say that from lots of firsthand experience. Once you think you figure it out with somebody, and then you start seeing somebody else, you got to start over again, at least to an extent, for sure.
Yeah, and not only that, but there's also the classic paradox that men usually talk about, that I think it applies to both men and women, is that if you feel so much pressure to finish, that is going to cause anxiety, and then anxiety is going to cause you not to finish.
Yeah.
And then that's going to add more anxiety because the next time you're going to be more worried about it. Yes. And that's going to cause you not to finish. And that can be like a vicious cycle.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. Live in the now. Try to get out of your head while you're in the moment, while you're actually doing it. Try to get out of your head. But you probably need to spend a little bit more time in your head thinking about this and learning how your body works on your own, so then you can be you can communicate to your partner what he should be doing for you.
Yes, and that also goes back to the like accepting vulnerability point.
Yeah,
because that's like that's the way to break that vicious cycle.
Yeah,
is to accept the fact that you're vulnerable and that it's just a single instance, and it doesn't need to be weighed down with all this this anxiety and feeling like it's obviously an important thing, but it's not. If you get it in your head that it's like a seminal moment that I didn't even mean to do that one. Yeah, that you're gonna have you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, but have fun. Use 2 forms of protection until you're ready to have kids. Whenever that is, that's your choice. Oldman says 6. I say 2. Are there 6? I mean, besides using 6 condoms, are there 6 types of contraception out there? There probably is. But probably they start work.
Good to take together, though.
Probably not good to take all at the same time. No. I took the pill. I got an IUD. I got the patch. I got the sponge. And
got the tattoo.
Got the tattoo. Oh boy.
This is Guinan, by the way, for viewers. This is our mascot. My mascot, anyway.
Mm-hmm. I don't have a cat with me. I'm sad. Oh. Okay. Well, it's 10:15. Let's do one more.
Sounds good.
Let's do one more. Okay. Yeah, this one's also a doozy and kind of bums me out a little bit. And Oldman, before we went live, I told you a little bit about this one, so you're a little prepared for this. Okay, here we go. I just broke up with my girlfriend and I need some advice because I'm not dealing with it all that well. We both had been dating for around 7 months, and I'm convinced I'll never find anyone like her. The reason I broke up the reason I broke up was because our relationship was long distance. Initially it was not, and it was getting increasingly difficult to deal with it. I recently got a job too, which made it worse. I'm not sure what sense that makes, but okay. Moreover, the chances of us ending up in the same country in the future was quite low. We barely call each other, and although we text every day, we don't text a we don't text a lot. I don't know what that means. It's painful to end up like this. We ended up on a good note and decided to go back to being friends. I know it won't last and we eventually will part ways, but I find some peace in knowing that we'll at least be friends for a while. Honestly, it would have been better to end things on a bad note because it's so darn painful to end it like this, knowing damn well, darn and then damn, we still love each other. We are very open with each other, and we just say whatever is very openly. I don't know what that last part means. But long story short, person broke up with their partner for 7 months that they really, really love, but their long distance wasn't gonna ever not be long distance. I think that's a really good reason to break up with somebody.
I agree.
Like, are you just gonna have a relationship where you text someone for the rest of your life? Like, where does this go next?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I have a lot of experience with not exactly the situation, but something very similar that went on for far longer than the person who's asking the question. Um, and after that, I don't want to say that long distance relationships never work, because they do, and I've seen it happen, and people can be very happy. And I don't want to rain on anybody's parade here, but in general, my attitude towards long distance relationships is that there has to be a defined endpoint first, and then second, there also has to be some kind of establishment of a very regular schedule to see and talk to each other and spend time with one another. Texting is not going to cut it in the long term. You have to actually see each other, actually have a real conversation, even if it's not in the same room, even if it's across the world, even if it's across the equator. Then yeah, you need to have some real face to face time.
Yeah.
And if this person was asking me about it specifically, a friend of mine or an acquaintance or a member of my community, I would tell them that they need to get their expectations in order first. And I understand why it seems so much more heartbreaking to end something just because of a factor like distance and not because of an interpersonal conflict of some kind. It is sad.
Yeah.
Life is full of sadness. Life is full of impossibility. Life is full of events where things could have gone better, but for this stupid thing that got between you and another person. And that applies not just for romantic relationships, but all relationships. Um, yeah, and yeah, so basically, if this was a friend of mine asking, or an acquaintance or a member of the community, etc., then I would say that they need to accept it and move on
Yeah.
eventually. I might not put it that bluntly, but that is my general advice for this type of situation.
Um, I agree with that. Long distance relationships, you're absolutely right. I'm just going to kind of repeat what you said because I think this is the most important part for this. As long distance relationships can only work if there is an agreed upon concrete date when you will no longer be long distance. If you're just long distance for forever, or like someday we won't be long distance anymore, who knows when, it's not going to work out. There's no better reason to break up with someone than the fact that you can't see them. You can't be next to them, you can't sleep next to them, you can't have birthdays together, you can't uh, have a anniversary dinner party together. You can't have a sexual relationship in like physical face to face IRL sexual relationship with each other. If I understand that some people don't need or want that out of a relationship, but most people do. We'll assume these people do. Uh, that's not a relationship that you have. I understand if you really love someone, then you can make it work for a finite period of time. But you can't do that forever. And this person's clearly saying the chances that we'll ever be in the same country, even let alone the same city, is very low.
Yeah. Can I respond to one thing that you said there, Jeremy?
Yeah, please.
Which is that I think it is a relationship. It's just not a viable long-term romantic
Yes.
relationship.
Good. Thank you.
Because you can be in a relationship with somebody without descriptors. Being in a relationship with somebody is not the moment that you say, "Are you my girlfriend? Are you my boyfriend?" Being in a relationship with somebody is sharing each other's experiences and thoughts over a long period of time, and that's not something that people have one moment to choose. That's something that people develop over time, and I'm sure you're aware of that. But I just wanted to say,
No, you're absolutely right. And like this is one of the problems I found as I get older is I'm having a hard time remembering that there are people in the world that can fundamentally want very different things than what I want in a way that I can't understand, and that's okay. But I was in a long term. The first person that I was really in love with, my first love when I was in college, I was in a long term relationship with them for 3 years, and we saw each other, once every few months, but not any more than that. And there was always a vague plan of us to really for me to move to where she was. And I never did. I just didn't want to. I didn't realize I didn't want to for her or for anybody for any reason. And I kept putting it off and we kept making vague plans. When I move up there, we'll do this and we'll do that. And it never happened. And that was not the type of relationship that either of us wanted. But I understand you're right. The important things, at least a lot of the really fundamental things of a relationship, you can have remotely, and you can do that for quite a while. But for most people, I think that that's not sustainable, and that you
sure,
need to
I'm
have a
sure that
date.
there's exceptions,
Yeah, absolutely.
but don't assume that you're an exception just because you're so in love.
Yeah, and the other so I would say for most people, this is a very good reason, maybe the best reason to end a relationship with somebody. Besides, someone being, I don't know, like abusive or horrible or something. And so you're sad, your heart is broken. And I think that's good. In order to have a broken heart, that means that you have to have a heart. You have to allow yourself to feel and to form connections with people. In the same way that I always say, if you're over 30 and you don't have herpes, you've been doing it wrong. If you're, whatever, over some age, if you've been a dating person for a while and you haven't had your heart broken, if you haven't broken someone else's heart, you're playing it too safe. You got to put yourself out there. You have to open yourself up to love in order to be loved, and that means that's risk. That's a big risk because sometimes it doesn't work out. Most of the time, it doesn't work out, and then you feel sad and it sucks. But that means that your heart is working and it's good. You should have a broken
It's
heart.
also it's also really easy to get into the comfort level of being in a long-term, long distance relationship where you're like, at least I have somebody else.
Yeah.
At least at least I have a girlfriend, or at least I have a boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you know that that's valid. It's true. It can provide some level of comfort, but once you start getting uncomfortable, like the person who wrote the question clearly is with the situation, um, you need to examine that and find out if that's really what you want. Like, is that really the end of things? If there's no end date that has been agreed upon that is obviously going to happen, um, I feel like that's a rut that some people can run into, that I certainly have run into.
Yeah.
Like, I'll share a little bit of my experience, which is that there was supposed to be an end date of 1 year, and then it turned into 2. We blew past the 1 year mark, and I had to wait for 2 years. And in the end, that ended things. That was a part of what ended things. Even once she came back, it was the fact that we blew past that deadline, and that part of my life was so hard.
Yeah.
It can be very bad later on. Even once the period of separation is over, resentments might continue. Um, anyway, I don't necessarily want to say more about that concretely right now,
Sure.
but yeah, I have a lot of experience with this particular question.
Yeah. Um, I do too. But and you have to be willing to lose big if you want to win big. And if you want
Yeah.
love in your life, and if you don't, that's fine. But if you do, you got to put yourself out there, and there's huge risks in that. And the number of times that I have just been devastated because someone that I loved uh, didn't love me back or didn't want to love me back anymore. That's a horrible, horrible feeling, and it's a bad time. But every one of those situations, I'm glad that I felt because um, that meant that I was doing it right, that I was risking it because I was putting myself out there. And you need to keep
Yeah.
doing that. And the one other thing I'll say, Oldman, going back to something you said about like getting over it or something like that, was there's in 7 months, depending on your connection with this person, 7 months can be a long time. It can be a little bit of time. I've certainly fallen deeply and deeply in love with someone in less than 7 months. But you don't always get over stuff, especially like the big loves in your life, the big losses in your life. It's not that you get over it. It's just that you learn to carry it. It becomes part of your package, and you're always a little bit sad about it for the rest of your life. And that also means that you're doing it right. Uh, uh, but that's what life is the big loves, the big losses, the big traumas, the big joys, the big everything. You don't get over those. And the goal of getting over it isn't right. It's that you learn
Yes.
to handle it, and it becomes part of you, and it kind of goes into the background. Man, there's this song always makes me cry by Dire Straits, the Romeo and Juliet song. Do you know that song? Um, Everyone should, when we're done with the stream here, everyone should go and listen to this song. Uh, Dire Straits has this song called Romeo and Juliet, and it's about like if Romeo and Juliet didn't kill themselves at the end of the story, but they just like grew up, and they move on. And there's this line where Juliet goes, "Oh, Romeo, yeah, I used to have a scene with him," and that's her relationship with him, and it makes me so sad. Like I feel like I'm gonna start crying just talking about it. But that's how relationships go. Is there'll be this person that was your everything for 7 months, for 7 days, for 7 years, and you'll get to the point where you're like, yeah, I know that person.
Yeah,
That's someone
I
I
have
used to
two
have a
things
scene
that I
with.
want to say as my final advice, Jeremy, if that's all right.
Okay, please.
The first thing is that everyone's past is written in stone. This is one reason I don't like backwards time travel stories, because it gives us the fantasy that we have a game over and a reset or something like that. And your life is always going to be written in stone. There's nothing that you can do once a moment or a relationship or whatever else has passed to change that. And I think that's a really important adult lesson that we learn, especially in the age of video games. And I'm sorry to involve video games in this, despite the podcast's whole theme, I guess.
Uh-uh.
This is a secondary theme. Uh, yeah, and it took me a long time, maybe longer than it should have, for me to realize how permanent the past is. And that there's just no going back. There's no fantasizing about going back in time. There's nothing that you can do once a moment has passed to change it. And so you're right, Jeremy. Like these things are going to be carried with you throughout your life. You're always going to have some kind of regret about things that you wish that you could have done better, or that you could have acted better, uh, or that you even left. Even if it's not your fault, that you could have changed the scenario. And then the second thing I want to say is that I'm really glad that Jeremy agrees with me about if you have to lose big, then you have to win big, because that means when we go to Las Vegas, we're either going to lose a lot of money or we're going to win a lot of money.
So Oldman, I'll tell you, I love going to Vegas. I have a blast at Vegas. I don't gamble. I don't like gambling. I don't get a thrill out of it.
I'll go with Landon instead, but I'm going
You
to
should
tell
do
him your
that.
philosophy.
I'll go to Vegas with you when you guys are gambling. I'll be drinking and watching shows. But whatever like that gene is, that gives you like a thrill from risk. I don't have that. I don't have that.
I've never even gambled in my life. This is just like speculation on my part.
I feel like there's two types. There's people that like really enjoy that thrill, and then there's people that like this is gross and I hate it. And
I probably.
I'm one of those people. But even if you don't gamble, Vegas is still a blast.
Well, I'm going to keep your words in mind when I'm at the roulette table, is what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Fred Undead's joined us. Hey, Fred Undead, thanks for joining us. Coolest thing, Fred Undead and I went to Vegas a few years ago. Gosh, it's probably been way more than a few years ago now. And they have this, they call it the Neon Graveyard. It's like a museum of big neon Las Vegas signs. And you can go at night when they're all lit up. And some old Vegas dude gives you like a tour and he's like, mafia, 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 mafia. And it was really good. He's like, this one was owned by the mafia. This one was owned by the mafia. I don't even think I would have fun gambling someone else's money, Fred Undead, personally. The last thing I'll say about that person's question is, even though we just talked all about how some things you don't really get over, but, a good way to get over someone is to get under somebody else. So that brings us back to our sex conversation. And, it might be hard to see this now, but you will find someone that you have a similar, although not an identical connection with, for sure. But you'll never, relationships, people are unique. So the relationships are unique. So the idea of finding the same type of connection is never going to happen, but you might find a similar one. You probably will. There's a lot of people in the world.
Yeah, and you don't even have to look for a similar one necessarily, because something different can be so wonderful.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Oh boy. Okay. Well, I think that's the questions that I have prepared for today. Oldman, you're going to come back next week. Is that cool?
I'd love to.
Okay. Thank you. This has been The Advice Stream. I'm your host, Jeremy International. My guest has been Oldmin. Oldmin will be joining us next week, maybe even the week after that. We've been live on YouTube and Twitch and Facebook, as well as JeremyInternational.com. As always, if you would like to seek advice from me, your friend, Jeremy International, as well as my special guest, which for the next little while will be Oldman, then go on over to JeremyInternational.com and send a question there, and we will answer it on the air next week, Mondays at 9. By the way, all previous episodes of The Advice Stream, almost all previous episodes of The Advice Stream, are available at JeremyInternational.com. And there's also a button there where you could leave a tip if you want to. No pressure if you don't have a job otherwise. But, you could. And that'll do it for now. Thanks again, Oldman. Can you say bye-bye?
Bye, everybody. I'm glad you like my t-shirt.
We like your t-shirt. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Have a good one.